The circle map assignment is going to have considerably more steps this time around. So I'm going to start and stop the video, I think, a number of times to try to break things down a little bit. You'll be starting with downloading the data as you have done before, except this time when you download the data, you're not just going to be loading a set of geographic coordinate systems that make a boundary map. You're going to have to choose a specific projection that you are going to want to use. So you'll be doing this by importing a shapefile as before. But instead of importing just the sort of general outline that you're going to use, which was this world countries generalized, you're going to select a specific projection. And I've given you a number of different projections to use. You'll probably want to look at a couple of them to decide what it is you want to select. So I'm just going to test this Miller one right here and see if I like it and bring it in. And it is actually a projection that I think that I want to use. I'm going to be making a map of cities in Latin America. And this shows the size and shape of Latin America pretty well. If I were making a map of cities around the world, I'd probably want to use another projection because the northern latitudes are really quite large here compared to what they should look like. And so you'll want to make some judgments about what you're going to want to use. But this is going to get cropped down. So it's going to be a little bit not so important what the northern hemisphere looks like here. So now I'm going to bring in another set of data, and that other set of data is actually going to be the city data. And so I've stored all this data in a place where I can find it very easily on my computer, and hopefully it's right here under World Cities, and I'll bring that data in and say, okay. Now you'll see that the data are in the wrong position. That's because we're bringing it in using a geographic coordinate system, and the other map has projected coordinate system. But this is very easy to fix. We're just going to take the world city data and drag it into the projected data. And when it does that, it brings everything exactly where we want it to be. We can go ahead then and delete that world city data. And just to show you what we're looking at, if I double click on this, it will show that I'm using the Miller cylindrical projection right here. So that is showing that I'm using the proper projection. Now, as I said, I don't want to use this entire map. I actually want to use just a portion of it. So I'm going to unclick the selection, and then I'm going to zoom in just on Latin America. And you'll have to make some determination about what you want to look at and what you don't want to look at. It's really up to you how you do it in this assignment. But I am just going to use this one particular area, and I'm going to crop this, and I'm going to crop it by drawing a shape around South America. So here I'm on layer number 1 now, and I could lock these layers if I wanted to or felt the need to. I'm going to use the simple pen tool, and I'm going to essentially draw a polygon that goes all the way around South America. And I'm going to keep the Falkland Islands out of there so I don't piss off any British people maybe. And I'm going to go right through sort of Panama. And you'll see that will create a little bit of a leftover piece of topology later on, but it's not that big of a deal. I'll be able to clean it up easily. So now I have this layer selected, that polygon one, and I could just name this if I want to remember it for later, cropping polygon. And now with it selected, I am going to go to the cropping tool, and I'm going to crop to shape. And then it's going to ask me, do I want to do all layers in the document? And I do. So I'll say OK, and you'll see it's removed everything now. So now I'm actually going to lock that cropping polygon and make it invisible. And I'm actually going to lock the cities and make them invisible for the time period as well. And you'll see that there's this little piece of Panama sort of hanging out here. And I'm going to select that little piece of Panama right there, and I'm just going to delete it. And so now I have South America the way I want it to look. Then I can go ahead and turn the, I can turn the cities back on. Everything is locked. And now I have the map ready to go. I'm going to map this. You'll see that the artboard is a lot bigger than what I had before, but that's no problem. I'll just sort of mess around with that artboard size later on as I need to. The next step of the circle map is to actually make the circles. And again, I'm going to keep everything sort of, the artboard sort of big here, and I'll mess around with things later on. But what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a determination of what you want to show and how many cities you want to show. And if you try to map all of the cities that are in an area or in the world, you're just going to have far too many, and the map will be too busy and hard to look at. On the other hand, you don't want to just have, on a map like this, for example, 3 cities. So you'll probably have to experiment a little bit to figure out exactly what it is that you want to show. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the layer here, and I'm going to select that layer. So now all the cities are selected. And what I am going to do is I am going to what's called split this layer. I'm actually going to select the city sizes that I want. And I can do this by going to Object and then to Map Publisher. And then if I go all the way down here, it's actually just off the screen, you will find Split Layer. And it's going to bring up a little dialog box for you here. And it is showing that the source layer is going to be that World Cities, which I had highlighted. And now what you're going to have to do is build a little expression to choose the cities that you want to show. And you can do this by clicking on the expression builder right here. And then you're just going to make a tiny little formula here. And it's going to be based on the population, presumably, of the area. And so I'm going to double click on population and it brings it up. And I'm going to say, let's select every city that has a population that is greater than 2 million. And then I'm going to say OK, and it places that in there and tells me it is a valid name, and then or valid expression. Then it asks me what layer name should I call it, and I will just call it South America Cities. $2 million. Took me a while to get that, but I got it. And now I'm going to say OK. And now you can see it's created this new one up here. And I can actually lock this one and turn this off. And it shows the cities that I'm going to be mapping. And that's about the right number I figured out as I messed around with this a little bit. It did take me a number of times to do it. So now we are going to move from selecting the cities to actually mapping the cities. To map the cities, we are going to click on the Map Theme window, or open if it isn't already open, and we're going to add a new map theme. And it's going to come up with Style Sheet. We don't want that. We'll use that later. We want Chart instead. We'll use that in the next map that we make. And then we've got to give it a name, and I'm just going to call it City Population so I can find it. And say OK, and then it's placed it here in the map themes. And what I need to do is go in here and edit this. And when I edit it, click to edit, it's going to say it needs to have a legend layer, and that's fine. I'm going to click on that, and it will bring up a dialog box. And here is where we are going to create what we need. First thing we need to do is we need to change this from bar chart to pie chart. And then the next thing we want to do probably is to scale the circles. So we're going to scale the circles, and I'm going to do it from the attribute, and that attribute is going to be population, right? Because we want the circles of the cities to be the size of their population. And I'm going to say load that data. And then we get to select how we're going to do it. And I have found that using perceptual scaling and the attribute value seems to work pretty well. So you can mess around with that if you want to, but I'm just going to go with this sort of basic setup. and say OK. Now the next thing we need to do is to sort of give it a style of some sort. And to give it that style, we are going to click on this button right here, and you'll see that it just makes it as a circle. And you can go in here and select population. You can actually do a bunch of different things with it here and make a pie chart, but we're just going to have one simple feature here, and you have to select some attribute. And so I'm just going to select the population. And then you want to change the stroke and the fill here. And what I recommend that you do is that you choose a stroke that's sort of a lighter color. And so I'm going to choose sort of a light gray color, I guess, like this. And I'm not going to make it 1 point because that seems to be a bit too thick. Instead, I'm going to make it 0.3 points. And then I'm going to change the fill. And right now we have no fill whatsoever. I'm going to change that fill to sort of a handsome magenta color, but that's super bright. And so I'm going to reduce that down to 30%. And that's what our chart is going to look like. But there are a couple of other little options we need to change. One is we want this thing to be right on top of the point. And so I'm going to click right in the middle like that. And then that, I think, is all that we need to do. I've tried a little bit to sort the values. It doesn't seem to help a great deal. So we're just going to go with it like that. And then I'm going to say apply. And now I have a map that has the circles on them. And everything is looking pretty good. So now it's just about styling things and making a number of design decisions. So I'm going to get back to that in just a little bit. All right, let's start off with doing some styling things now. And you don't necessarily have to do this in the order that I'm doing it in. I'm just trying to move in a way that seems sort of reasonable to me, but obviously there are a lot of different ways to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the size of the artboard so I get an idea of the space that I'm working with. So I'm just going to reduce this and sort of try to figure out exactly where I think I might have the ultimate borders of the map. This, of course, can be changed later, as we know. Remember that when you're making the map, you're going to try to provide some balance at the end of it. And trying to figure out that balance is related to the artboard. But one of the great things about being able to use Illustrator is we can make these changes very easily. So now I'm actually, I guess I should make this a little bit bigger and get right down in here and look at things. Let's change the colors a little bit so things make a little bit more sense. I'm just going to make sure that everything's locked here so I don't make a mistake and put something in a layer I don't want to. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to take that all the way to the very bottom of the map, I guess above that cropping polygon. And the first thing I'm going to do with that layer is I'm going to make the background color. And I'm going to make it a blue color to show the ocean, to try to show that figure ground contrast a little bit that we've talked about. So I'm going to, in the back, draw the rectangle. And then I'm going to go change the properties of that rectangle so that there is no stroke and so that the fill is a blue color. And I'm going to choose that blue color, but I'm going to change the opacity dramatically from 100% to 20% rather. Now, maybe a little bit more than 20%. Let's make it 35%. Yeah, there's a blue that maybe I can live with. I'm going to go back to the layer now, and I'm actually going to lock that one, as we usually do. And I'm going to go to the World Countries layer and unlock that and just select the whole thing. And I want to produce that figure ground contrast now. So I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to change the fill. And I'm going to use the sort of traditional fill that I've been using, which is a sort of light brown color here, to allow us to see the ground. And then I'm going to change the stroke here, and I'm going to change the stroke color to a dark brown, but I'm going to make the point size quite small again, so it's not quite so garish. And I think I'll go with 0.3 point and see what it looks like, and then we can change out later. So now I'm going to lock that. But now we're starting to have something that looks a little bit more like a map. Now, one of the things that I did mention briefly is that the way that the circles are spawned sometimes we have circles not exactly where we want them to be. And I could spend a lot of time on this, but I don't think I want to spend too much time on this. But you can see, for example, that these larger circles are sort of over the top of the smaller circles here. So I would like to actually move those things around. So I'm going to expand the whole chart here, and I'm going to go to the selection tool, and I'm going to grab Bogota right here. And Bogota, you'll see, shows up right here. I'm just going to drag that down below, so it's below some of these other circles that I see here. These other ones will be on top then. And that's what I want to have happen for all of these. I want to have the largest cities sort of in the background compared to the smaller cities. And here's another one where that happens. I believe that's Rio or Sao Paulo. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to move it down to the bottom as well. And you can see that adjustment that was made right away when I did that. I'm not going to do it for all the circles because it would take a little bit too much time, and I'm sure I'd need to make a whole bunch of different adjustments to get it perfect, but you get the idea of the principle that we're working on here. So let me collapse that chart now and zoom out just a little bit so that we can see things. And we're going to get ready to do a couple of other little styling things that we want to do to this map as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add labels, and I'm going to add labels to the chart. But what I need to do actually is select the cities in order to do that. So I have to unlock the city layer and select that. And so now you can see those cities are selected. And if you've made them invisible at some point, you'll have to make them visible. And then I'm going to go to one of the labeling tools, and I'm going to the simple one, which is called Label Features. And in order to do it, it says we're going to have a new layer name called Labels. That's fine with me, so I'll say OK to that. And then it brings up a little feature labeling window. And this is pretty easy to use. I've got my South American cities, 2 million here. I'm going to select this attribute, and what I want to select, at least the first time around, is the city's name. And then I want to put these into the labels target. And then you can actually select where you want them to be, in the upper right, in the center, whatever. I'm just going with the upper right for now because I'm actually going to move them around a little bit. And I'm going to say, OK. And now we have labels for each of these cities. But the labels are pretty big, so while they are still selected, I'm going to go to the properties, and I think I have the wrong thing selected. I want to go to the labels right here. And actually, while I'm doing this, I'll show you something that I find is somewhat useful. I'm going to create another little subfolder here, and I'm going to change that to city names. And then I'm going to take all of these city names, and I am going to drag them into that. And I didn't get them quite all, so let me get the last two here. And I can drag them in like that. And now I can just select that one folder and then later lock it and make any changes that I need to here. So I'm going to go to the properties now, and you'll see that it's selected a font. And you can change that font, of course. I'm just going to go with the easy one right now. But I want the names of the cities to be quite smaller than that. So I'm going to go actually down to 6 points. You can choose what you want based on what you're looking at and what you want to do with the map. And then we'll come back to the layers right here. Now we can go ahead and select these names, and we could start to move them around a little bit. And so again, this is an unlocked layer, the labels. I'm going to lock the cities themselves, click out here, and I'm going to move Buenos Aires as the name. And what is useful to do is have the name associated with the circle by having it and touching that circle, but as it is here and here. But when things get a little bit sloppy in here, you might need to change things around a little bit more. And so I'm going to take that Sao Paulo one and drag it down here, and then take the one that's for Rio and put it here, so we can see the difference between one and another like this. So you'll have to mess around a little bit. And again, I'm not going to do a ton of this work right now. I'm just giving you the sense of how it looks. And clearly I made a mistake there, but luckily I can go back and undo the scale. And let's try selecting that one again. And remember, if you're worried about dragging it like this, you can use the arrow keys to move it. So now I'm using the arrow keys instead of dragging it. So it works a little bit better. And again, all these things are going to have to be changed and modified before I have the final map that I want. I am just showing you at this point how to do the basic work. And we'll get Medellin right here. And for the time being, this is good. So now I'm going to lock the city names, but I haven't locked all the labels, because another thing that I found at least useful with this map that I've been making is to actually have some labels that show the population, just of the very biggest of the cities here, not the smallest of the cities. I'm going to have a legend that shows it for the smaller cities, but the really big ones, like if I try to symbolize Buenos Aires here with this great big huge circle, the legend's going to take up a ton of the map. And so I'm going to go back to my cities and I'm going to select it again. And now I'm going to go to the labeling again. I'm going to keep the target as the labels, but I'm going to change the attribute from the city name to the actual population itself and say OK. And it's going to spawn all of those. And then what I can do in here is I can just take the very largest cities and drag them to the top. And so let me do just a couple of these right now. And I haven't really decided which ones I'll keep and which ones I won't. So for the time being, I'm just going to put all of the cities that are sort of above 6 million population. And then I'm going to come down here and select all of these. And I think it will let me delete them all in one fell swoop, which it did right there. And then because I've got the city names here, I might as well make another layer that's called something like population. And I can drag these in there and, excuse me, oops, and suddenly I moved all of my city points right here. I obviously don't want that to happen. So I'm going to move those back to where they belong. I think I'm good now. Okay. I'm going to grab all of these right here, and I am going to problems getting them in. So I'm just going to do them one by one. So hopefully what you figured out by now is most mistakes that you make can be fairly easily corrected, as I've done right here. I don't want to keep these where they are. I want to move these populations, in my case, to right underneath the other cities and the city names. And I actually don't think I want them that large either. I think that that is going to be, those numbers are just too big. And so I think that what I would want to do ultimately is go in here and change the font, not the font, but the font size for all of the population. So let me just lock the whole beast here, unlock it, go in, select them, and change that property from 6 point and maybe move it down to something smaller like 4 points. And then I can move these around again as I need to put them in the position where I think they should be. And again, this was just, I was doing this personally just for the largest cities here. And I think they show up well enough that, for a rough go at the map, this is working. So now we have done most of the styling of the symbols and the styling of the map. What is left to do here is to do the various pieces of marginalia that we need to have on the map. And so I'm going to stop this video now and come back to that in just a second. Now it's time to do some of that basic cartographic design that we've talked about before. And I am definitely not going to do all of it now, because I think you know by now that that's sort of the fussy part of this whole process. But what I can do first is clean things up just a little bit, make sure that things like layers are collapsed and things are turned off. I think that I might be done right now looking at the South American cities, so I can turn those off and see what the circles are going to look like on their own. But I'm going to make sure I lock that layer just in case I make some mistake and do something with it. Now you'll want to create a couple of other layers. And so I'm going to create a layer here that is going to be for the legend. And then I'm going to create another layer that is going to be for text, I guess I'll call it. And I'll start with those. So I'll have to build a legend and place it somewhere on this map. And you can do that by first selecting a couple of these circles and using them as representative proportionate sizes of the map. So I'm going to unlock this, and then I'm going to use a selection. And if I know what the population of one of these places is, I can select this, and I can just do a basic copy, and I can go up to the legend, and then I can paste it there. And it has appeared there, but it's over here. But I can grab it and move it down to where I want it to be here. And then maybe I'll need something a little bit larger as well. And so I'm going to grab another one and do the same thing. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it in the legend. And move that down there as well. And then, of course, I'll need to add text to that will be aligned with this. And here I am going to use the arrow key to make sure that things are fairly lined up. And maybe draw a little box around it or something like that. So that's how you'll be creating the legend. And I actually have my completed map here just to show you what I did on that. So let me switch to that very briefly. You can see I ended up making the legend that shows the urban population with two representative circles, one of 2 million, one of 6 million, and then the source from the United Nations. And then for the areas, the cities that were greater than 6 million, they got their own circle with their own little label on them. And then, of course, you'll need to lock that legend up and then put text in the text area. And so I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to put the title here. And I think everyone knows how to do this now, so I probably don't have to spend a lot of time working on this sort of thing. But we might as well at least make the title a little bit bigger. And so I will make it bigger by going to the properties and bouncing that up from 4 point, which is pretty tiny, all the way up to maybe 24 points or something like that. And then let me zoom out here a little bit. Oops. Oh, I guess I have this selected, so I got to deselect that. And then now I can zoom out. Probably too small. But again, it doesn't matter. I'm just sort of showing you what to do. Let me drop that title in here. And then, of course, you'll do all the rest of the stuff as well. But there is something else that I wanted to show you how to do, and that is how to add both a scale and a north arrow to the map as well. So everything's locked up here. I think I'm in good shape. The next thing that I'm going to do is go back to the map views, which we haven't been to for a little bit. You can see now the various layers that we've created, like the charts and the labels, are all there. I'm going to select this, and I'm actually going to create a brand new map view. And I'm going to add a map view that is a legend. And you can give it whatever name you want it to be. You could call it marginalia, or you could call it scale and north, or something like that. And I'm going to create that. And then you'll see it creates a layer here, but it's also created it in the map view itself. And what that means is that this is linked to the projected coordinate system, which means that when we create our scale and our north arrow, it is going to be geographically accurate on the map, which is sort of a cool thing to do. So now we have to go ahead and create these two things. And there are layout tools that allow us to do that. The north arrow is pretty simple, so let me do that first. You are first going to have to spawn your symbol window. So here's the symbol window down here, and let me drag it out so that you can see it. And you might have already figured this out, but if you go over here to the hamburger menu in symbols, you can go to a symbol library, and you can scroll down to map symbols. And you can't see this right now, but if I go to others, I think it's other symbols in map symbols, there are north arrows. And so I clicked on that and I have created this little open north arrow. And I'm just going to select one of these north arrows. I want to choose something that doesn't look too overwhelming. And I will just select north arrow number 6. And you'll see that as soon as I clicked it, it appears over here. So let's get rid of the symbol window for the time being. But this is selected right now. That's the important thing. And I can move the north arrows out of the way as well. I might need them later. Then what I can do, making sure that I'm on the right layer, is I can go to the symbol sprayer. And the symbol sprayer is right here. It looks like a little can of spray paint. Click on that, and then I can make that north arrow. And before I do anything else with it, I can go up to the Create North Arrow tool and click on it, and it will change it to the direction of north, wherever north is on your map. Mine happens to be right up in this area because of the way the map is projected, but it might change a little bit. And now I can change the size of it by going to Object, Transform, and Scale. And I want that to be a lot smaller than this is, so I'm just going to make it 30% for now. Again, realizing I can change things around later as I want to. So let's open that up. There's that Map Publisher north arrow. That shows us it's activated. I'm going to lock it. And I also want to get out of the spraying tool so I don't accidentally spray another north arrow someplace. So now I'm going to create a scale. So that will be separate. And there's a scale bar tool that you can use. So I'm going to click on that. And it does give me a little warning here that says, be aware that the map scale and scale bar length will vary significantly between the northern and southern extents of the map in this current coordinate system. So that's fine. Don't worry about that too much. We just want this to show a general scale. I say OK to that, and it spawns another little window. And now this one, you're going to have to do a lot of modification to get it to look just right. And I mean, one of the first things you'll want to do is you'll want to make it considerably smaller. I mean, this is sort of big and pudgy looking. So I'm going to bring it down to 5 pixels, and I'm going to, let's see, change a few other things here. I want to change the intervals. Currently, they're in meters, which is great, but I'm going to make it into kilometers, and I'm going to change the scale from 3,000 to 1,000. Maybe that's too much. Maybe I should make it to 2,000. And I can change the intervals here. I've got 4 right now. And you can even subdivide intervals if you want to. So you'll see what that looks like when you do it, so that there'll be sort of breaks in the line. And I can change all sorts of different things here, right? I mean, there are lots that you can do. One of the most important thing probably to do is to display the units to the right of the last interval label. So if I click on that, it shows kilometers up there. And then, then we can sort of know what this is going to look like. This is going to end up being too large, the scale, but I'm going to use it for the time being. So I'm going to say OK to this, and then you'll see that it's on the map right now. And of course, I can move it around to the position that I want it in. So the thing to do if you want to change the scale, and clearly I need to change that scale, it's not perfect for what I'm looking at, is make sure it's selected, and then you can go back to the scale bar tool up here, and this window appears, and then we can come in here and we can make whatever changes we want to. So maybe it should be 1,500 kilometers. I don't know. Or maybe I should just bring this down to 3 intervals. It's really, you can see it's made that split right there. There are a bunch of different ways that we can make this smaller. Here I've made it smaller, but the font size is too big. But you get the idea at least of how to create it. If you look at my thinnest circle map, and I scroll down here, or let me zoom out just a little bit, you'll see I made it relatively small on the bottom down here. And I tried to use this, both the scale bar and the north arrow to address sort of negative space that I had in the map. And I'm not exactly sure that I like where the title position is. It's at the top of the map, which is good. Not on the right side of the map. I mean, it should be over on the left so we could see a little bit better. But I was trying to balance the space a little bit. And the way that South America juts out like this, there was a bunch of negative space created anyhow. And so I was, sort of experimenting with ways to do that. In class, you can tell me if you think this works or not. Let's see, is there anything else I want to say about this map? One last thing is I used a couple of neat lines on this map. You'll see that there's a line here and then another line around the legend. With all the circles and all the busyness, I wanted to frame the map a little bit to give it a little bit more integrity and have the elements of it hold together. Again, you can tell me if you think that worked or not. There are obviously some things I could change. I think maybe the font size of the source is too large. I also didn't put my name on the map either, which you guys should definitely do. But this was just sort of a quick attempt to try to figure out this whole process. So hopefully this helps you. And as always, you are free to send me any questions you have and ask me if you need me to make little videos or something like that.